piece is we're going to be doing our Q&A through Slido. And if you're not familiar with Slido, I promise it is probably one of the easiest ways to crowdsource a good Q&A. So on any device, if you want to pick up your phone or on your computer, open up a browser and head to slido.com, type in the code Decarb, and there's going to be an opportunity to engage here very quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my Slido so that folks can see what that all looks like here. All right. So this is in Slido. I can add a question. Sorry, I keep being asked to bring more folks into this wonderful conversation. As folks enter questions, you can also vote up questions. And at the end of each panel, we will be announcing the top questions for our panelists to answer. Also at this time, if you hop into polls, there should be a poll available to us, and we invite you to just answer, where are you calling in from? And if you want to take just a few seconds right now, we would love to hear where folks are calling in from. And if you want to type in your city. All right, we've got Oakland, Hayward. Oakland still rules. A couple from Berkeley. Great to see the land acknowledgement, Ohlone Land, East Oakland, the neighborhood of District 5, San Francisco. Wonderful. If you want to continue to add in your votes here over the next minute, we'll get to see kind of where folks are calling in from and who is here in the room. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move us back over to our presentations. I'm excited to welcome Mick Penn joining us today. He'll be moderating this first panel. Mick is with the Swinnerton Builders as the Northern California Regional Community Relations Liaison, where he spearheads their workforce development, small, diverse veteran business outreach, and community engagement in Northern California. He's also closely involved with the leadership and board of the Cypress Mandela Center, and we are just so thrilled to have Mick here today to lead us through this first conversation about what it's like on the ground, putting the nuts and bolts and pieces together around decarbonization of our transportation and buildings. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mick.
Thank you, Michelle. And I see Daryl up there. Shout out to Daryl at Rising Sun for the recommendation. Really happy to be here today. We have a great set of panelists here. Just a quick plug though for Swinnerton Renewable Energy. I bet a lot of people didn't know that we have a renewable energy group that does work all across the nation, and really proud of their efforts in community development, economic development, working with the Native people, across a span. So shout out to Swinnerton Renewable and Cypress Mandela. The partnerships that we have developed and the programming, in partnership, with employers. Just really excited to be here to discuss this topic and all the exciting possibilities of the future. So with that, let me go ahead and begin the introductions with my panelists. Alex, go ahead and unmute yourself and give us an introduction.
Sure. My name is Alex Landsberg. I'm the Research and Advocacy Director for the San Francisco electrical construction industry. I'm a planner by background and have been sort of involved in this space of energy, the energy transition, labor, and the role of local government for a number of years now.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And Keith, go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself.
My name is Keith O'Hara. I'm president of Eco Performance Builders. We're a contracting company that does home performance and heat pump retrofits in the Bay Area. We've been in business 12 years. We employ 22 people.
Okay, awesome. And then Paul.
Good morning, everybody. Paul Francis, CEO, co-founder of Kidget. We are a manufacturer of electric vehicle charging stations and vertically integrated software network company as well.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all the panelists. So the way we're going to structure this today is we're going to have a presentation from Keith, a presentation from Paul, and then we'll get into the panel. I have my Slido, is it Slido open? So I'll take a look and see if there are any questions. Make sure that if you have them, drop them in there. And with that, let's go ahead and begin.
Oh, hey, I'm Keith again, and this is my company again, Eco Performance Builders. Like I said, we're a home performance and all electric retrofit contractor. We've been doing this for 12 years, installing high performance mechanical systems and fixing houses. We're a general HVAC and installation contractor. We specialize doing in design, build, and commission. And it's our workforce that does all of that work. I just oversee as much as I can. And then basically fix houses for air quality, efficiency, comfort, and convert to all electric heat pump systems. That's my team. They're the heroes of the home performance industry, all the crew members that get all that done. And those are the people that are electrifying homes. It's really hard work. And it's, we just owe them a lot of gratitude. I try to give them as much as I can. And it's difficult to describe, like the work and moving up to the trades of doing this. So they asked me to present on my thoughts on the workforce and workforce development. So basically this work requires someone who's mechanically inclined, strong and lean, has a hustle mentality. And if someone who wants to become a crew lead or have a higher position than that would need natural leadership, hopefully. Those are ideal traits in people that we look for. And we typically start people without any experience. So I don't think we have anyone that actually came from the HVAC industry, including myself. I was a carpenter, so foundation, framing, and finish for about a decade before I got into performance systems. So we train them, we work through them, we work along with them to move them through the trades for better position, higher earnings, and basically trade mastery to really succeed in their career path to just have a better life and a better living. You go to the next slide, or do I do it? Oh, thanks. These are heat pump systems. Our guys live in, men and women, I'd say we have women in the field as well. They install heat pump systems in attics and crawl spaces, retrofitting homes. So it's not always easy to fix a home or to retrofit it. And they're in some pretty tight spaces sometimes, and sometimes it's better. And it's really rewarding work, but also really difficult work. They have to work off of advanced design, install it all, then commission it to make sure it works up to specs, to our high standards. And there's just a lot of potential for growth as far as understanding how the systems work and how to design them, commission them, and then install them better, and then train other people to do the same. Next slide. These are more systems, just ventilation systems for fresh air, for filtered air. So when we're improving these homes to make them not only perform better for efficiency and all electric, but also adding in fresh air systems, things like that. Sometimes simple fresh air systems, sometimes more involved. So as you can see, the work gets pretty detailed that they all have to do, and they just do great at it, and they all love it. So next slide. More intricate work with refrigeration systems. So being able to fine tune them, make sure they're leak free, checking all the system statuses, make sure everything's functioning correctly after doing the job. And then, as you can see, just doing high quality work. Next slide. Then we go to advanced commissioning systems. So we're actually measuring the BTU output of every system and putting it into our spreadsheets and other systems to make sure everything is actually functioning the way it should as to the standards and the specs from the manufacturer. So we actually go and measure airflows and BTUs and calculate it all. So when they're done, the actual technician is finished. They know exactly what happened with the system, what went right and wrong with design or install, to be able to do even better systems in the future, which is super important to me. Next slide. So we talk about home performance a lot, even though this is just about electrification or decarbonization, but we talk about efficiency a lot because we won't, even though we're using electric, we want to use less of it if we can, especially during peak. So we talk about home performance as science, treats home as a system. High performance home retrofits involves advanced heat pump, ventilation, air barrier systems, insulation, and water heating. So it's not just a silver bullet approach to fixing a home. We're in all the aspects. So currently we have 3 mechanical crews and 1 insulation crew that does all the air barrier and insulation systems, and they work hand in hand with each other to fix these houses, as well as doing water heater, heat pump changes. There's just a lot that goes into it. It's more of like a construction project. So they get a lot of teamwork and being able to work with other trades, work with subcontractors, as well as working with their own team to get these projects complete. It's a lot. There's a lot going on, and so it's a good career path, like to learn a lot of the skills needed to succeed in really any trade, as well as especially the ones we do. So next slide. Hands-on trade skills are, high performance mechanical system installation and commissioning. All we do is heat pumps, but they would be able to do other systems too if they ever wanted to. High performance duct system installs. None of these people came from the HVAC industry, but every system they put in has 0 duct leakage, which the California standard is 5% leakage. But all of our crew that had no experience before is able to far surpass those standards. We put in electrical systems. We do most of them ourselves as far as the new circuits we have to run. Water heater installation and commissioning for heat pump water heaters, air sealing, understanding air barriers in homes, attic insulation, and then ventilation systems, whether they be spot bath fan ventilation or HRV installations. And next slide. This is our super high-tech training center in our back parking lot. So we don't have a whole lot of resources for training, but we get by with what we have, and basically just start rolling the cords out every 2 weeks. We meet after work and we go over whether it's training for refrigeration to using a skill saw if you're more entry level, to high performance systems in homes and how it all works and is put together, to electrical systems. And everyone gets checked out on all the pathways to be able to master your trade, get to the next tech level position, the higher pay, higher seniority, or better but different position in the company. So we do that as well as on the job training, but a little bit of supplemental training is definitely necessary. That what we found out. Next slide. This is more of our super high-tech training center. We just basically build heat pump systems, roll them outside and put them together and take them apart, remove refrigeration, put it back together. These people are super dedicated. They come after work just to learn more, just to move up in their career. And that's part of the reason why people actually join us, because we actually do supplemental training so they can advance, and it really works as far as getting that buy-in from them. And then it's me who's coming in to train them. So I definitely have buy-in, and I want them all to succeed and move throughout their career for their benefit, our benefit, and for the overall cause of just fixing more homes. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. And Keith, you got quite a few questions coming through in the Slido. And so we'll get to those questions. Remember, you can prioritize by liking that question and moving it to the top. And with that, let's go ahead and pass it off to Paul to talk about his company.
Yeah, good morning once again. It's truly a pleasure to be here and discuss a little bit about what we do at Kidget. Often in our business, our motto, we say reshaping 100 years of human habit. And when people ask what is a Kidget, we have to tell them it stands for Keep It Green Transit, Keep It Green Tech, and Keep It Green Team. And one problem that we're solving that we've noticed over the past several years is that unfortunately, the infrastructure is old and unequipped. I mean, because we all are imagining a world where we wake up every morning and we have a full tank. We leave work, we have a full tank. And then when we get home at night, we still have a full tank, and that car provides the electricity for our family and our friends in the evening. But before we can get to this autotopia, Jetsons like future, we have to address the current issues. Next slide, please. And what we're seeing is infrastructure equity has to happen when there's equitable funding. In the past, you often see the folks that are building the future are often left behind and don't benefit from what they're building. And what we have here is a great opportunity to do exactly that. What we're finding is in the community, you have folks with trade. Next slide, please. Folks with experience when you talk about projects and infrastructure. Next slide. And then what happens and what you're seeing now with the current administration with building businesses better, they're expecting 500 million EV charging stations, 500,000 EV charging stations. More when you're talking about residential. And there's going to be nearly $8 billion of funding for EV charging. Let's make sure the neighborhoods that often get left out get a large majority of this funding. And what happens is you see economic growth when you're building businesses better. As we mentioned, this project we've done here was with an electrician who has their engineering credentials, who did the installation, because it's not just high tech. We're talking about folks that actually have to do wiring, like from IBEW and the trades, people who have masonry skills and things of that nature. One concern that we're seeing, and we're hoping that can have some changes, in local projects, we're finding that the infrastructure is dated and antiquated and it can't even fit 10 EV charging stations in a simple parking lot. Faith-based organizations can benefit greatly, we're finding out from this, because they have land space and there's revenue opportunities. But it's taking months and almost 2 years in some of the areas we're working at, like South LA, to get projects done. And then OEMs like us have to invest nearly $50,000 to $250,000 to upgrade local infrastructure just to put in several charging stations in the local grid. So next slide. But with that, it's not all terrible, because there's green jobs opportunity that are happening, not just for the folks in trades who have to have their hours and electricians, but also IT, networking. The requirement for us as a charging station manufacturer is that they have to be smart. They have to be connected to a network. So we were given the opportunity to do the first ever training with a community partner in Lacey, where we trained folks, about a third of them were recently incarcerated, on just how to fix the network issue of chargers. Because a dirty little secret in our industry is that maybe 20 to 30% of the stations you see out there are inoperable. They don't work. With that is opportunity to employ people here. And about a third of them afterwards were able to get employed and get jobs through this program. Some of them were able to get stipends afterwards, which I know many of you who go to school, you get a bill, they got paid. So next slide, please. And with that, they were able to get different skills on how to do 3D CAD design. When we say we manufacture, our business is 100% American made. Everything in California thus far and soon to be in New York. You have manufacturing trades, new skills where people were able to get through that training program, how to do 3D CAD designs to make curvature so that metal fab companies can bend metals. In this new future, just like in the New Deal almost 100 years ago, we're going to need steel and metal to build this infrastructure. Next slide. And through that, you're talking about community partnerships. There's people here, it's not about losing jobs, but retraining people to fit the new jobs of the future. And not just through the infrastructure bill. There's current mechanisms where if we could refocus and have dedicated buckets allocated to communities that are often underserved and the frontline communities that helped us through a pandemic, we can pay them to get retrained. As mentioned, this group received almost a $1,200 stipend after they completed the 6-week course. And now we're fortunate to partner with Goodwill to do some work in communities outside of Los Angeles as well now. Next slide. But our passion came from, and we must give big ups to our local high schools. They're the ones who brought us into the fold of figuring out how to train, and it started with the youth. These brilliant students wanted the opportunity to learn about their new climate tech future and what's going to save their world. So we were able to get them in, give them engineering opportunities, how to software and program. As our business, we are able to hire some in the future. And our Latinx woman is our lead software programmer. We have a chemical engineer from this group, Latinx man, who's now leading our project management for microgrid projects. And so what we're saying is if you start young in these programs, you're able to bring them to the fold and cultivate this talent so that they have the skills in the future. Next slide. And so as a result, some of our work we're in San Jose, doing a project with First Housing as an impact project at a low income housing development, with Envoy, where they're gonna have car share EVs rented for gig economy or to run errands. We also did the largest single site install in California history with 200 stations at the county fairgrounds. We completed the first ever African-American installation from engineering to construction to OEM. And a third of these folks were not just hired with Kidget, but other clean tech companies because they got project management certifications, CAD design certifications, and the network training that made them hireable for other clean tech companies to find them valuable. And so just like nearly 100 years ago, the New Deal produced the Hoover Dam, produced the River Rock in San Antonio, and also the Bay Bridge. And the people here in this room are the ones that are going to build this next future. And we also think they should be able to benefit from what they're building. And together, we can reshape 100 years of human habit. Thank you.
Wow, Paul. Thank you. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Paul. Before we move on to the questions and answers, we're scrolling back to set it up for my guy, Alex. Alex, any thoughts? You want to talk a little bit about the electricians and operating in these spaces?
Yeah. First off, before I begin, I mean, if we were in, I'm looking for my document here. If we were in person, I would ask everybody to give both Keith and Paul a really big hand, because I think the presentations that they gave are in many ways indicative of what's possible, and also in so many ways of what's not being done in the sector. It's like, because I think what these guys are doing is outstanding, and I think it needs to be recognized. And I think we need to drive public policy to support things like that. And that's sort of part of my part of what I wanted to say. So I know that we can't hear everybody, can't hear each other, but everybody give these two guys a hand, because I think they're doing really incredible work. So a couple things. Like I want to step back a little bit. And I think actually Paul touched on it a little bit, but part of what we're talking about, part of what we're doing is really rethinking how we organize and structure our built environment. We're talking about completely redoing how we power our homes, how we move around, really how everything is organized. So there's a lot to think about, and obviously there's a huge opportunity in doing that. And as we do that, we need to think about the just transition analysis and where the perspective that we take. What I've been arguing for a little bit now is that we need to start this analysis from the standpoint of the worker. We need to take a look at the work that they do now, the work that they need to be doing in the future, and the opportunities to make that transition happen in a way that is that produces as little disruption to their lives as possible, because that's part of how you make this, is part of what makes it just. And what we see is that the nature of the work itself doesn't change all that much, but it goes towards different ends. It uses different equipment. It uses, obviously things get updated. But I think as Paul showed us, this is in many cases on the construction side traditional construction work. It's just done slightly differently with a variety of different policy pushes happening. So as we do that, we need to really put job quality at the center, training, professional development, safety. I want to use the word thrivable wages instead of just livable wages, because I think that almost sort of sets our ambition a little bit too low in that sense. But these are central to attracting people to this work, making this trend, I'm going to go with the air quotes, just transition more than just a nice phrase. If you listen to a lot of folks in the trades, there's a lot of cynicism about that phrase. So we really need to make sure that the policies and actions back up the rhetoric. And towards that end, government has to play a sustainable in this process. So much of the way government acts or has acted in the past, I think in many ways has been, the best way to say it's submerged, it's hidden. We have all these policies that push things in one direction or another, and push people to make certain choices. And the role of government ends up becoming obscure. We're taking a much more active role these days. We've got the California Public Utilities Commission in the process of doing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in grants through AB 841, through ratepayer efficiency charges, through the CEC's EPIC program, through market transformation, all these different things. They're going to be just throwing gobs of money into trying to make this transition happen. And we've got local governments who are, at the end of the day, where the rubber hits the road. This is where policy comes into contact with reality. In many cases, state agencies are often disconnected from local communities, but local government is where it's at. Obviously we live where we live. We have relationships most likely in the places that we're at. So to focus in on local government as really the implementing agency, as the fulcrum, as the lever to make all this happen, I think is really important. And this is where we can take a look at, and before I kick it back to questions, we really need to, I actually want to bring it back to that third point that I made about job quality. We have options on which ways you can go. If you've seen a lot of, you may have seen a lot of memes coming from the national building trades showing that like 82% of solar projects are built non-union, and some 70% of wind projects around the country are built non-union. And the reason for that is that our economic system is such that the people who control the money are often the ones in charge. And in most parts of the country, outside of, let's say, California, parts of Nevada, Minnesota, maybe some the Midwestern states, workers are the last ones thought about in this process. And that's why you see all this resistance. And like some of us in California, we take a look at some of the resistance we see from labor outside of our immediate urban areas, and we're puzzled why, or some people are puzzled why, but when you dig into it, you understand. It's because it ends up becoming a transition, but it's not very just. So with that, we need to make sure that that as we choose which road we take, we pick the high road, that just because you have a brand name like Tesla or whatnot that's shiny and they gets all the play doesn't actually mean it does right by workers. What we need to do is focus on the nuts and bolts stuff like what Paul is doing that really focuses in, again, from a bottom-up perspective to achieve the decarb goals that we absolutely all recognize at this point have to be met.
Okay.
I'll stop talking.
All right. Thank you, Alex. And I do have a question for you, Alex. I'm going to try to respect the Slido, but this has been a really, really great presentation conversation. So let me stop talking and get to the questions. Keith, is it easier for people with gas HVAC experience to transition into doing heat pump work, or does it come from a gas system background? Coming from a gas system background, make it harder?
No, it makes it easier. If you have experience in HVAC or really any of the trades, it's gonna be a much easier transition. A heat pump's not entirely complicated to install. It's just a little more detailed to design and commission. And so any background you have in any of the trades will be super helpful, and especially HVAC.
Okay. And for Paul, question comes in. How many of your students, workers haven't finished high school versus high school grads versus AA or college? So what is the blend of education for the folks that work for you?
So the thing with our team, most of them are high school graduates. About half of our team are college graduates. Myself, been to college, but like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, I thought I can do what they did, and I just was finished before I got my degree. So I mean, pretty much we're blended there. And then in the training program, I mean, you saw folks who were the ages of 45 were back in when they were early in their workforce days in the 80s, a degree wasn't required. And they were fit for this skill set of learning how to do the network training. And then you also had in that same course college students who are still getting their degrees that wanted to get skilled in something else. So what we're finding is it's blended because the skill sets are transferable.
Okay, awesome. For Keith and Paul, and I'm going to get to Alex, for folks that come to you with little previous experience, do they mention any obstacles they have faced securing employment in the past? And Paul, I'll have you go ahead and start, and Keith, you follow up.
Yeah, I mean, because where we do our recruiting, we work with Job Corps centers, working with Lacey, they develop partnerships with transitional housing facilities, and many of those they have issues coming, right out, being released. The opportunities are very thin and scarce. And what we found was they were actually more focused because when they come out, they're seeking an opportunity. And when you are locked up, you develop some sort of discipline. And we found it quite because you have to go to bed at a certain time, eat at a certain time. So that discipline actually helped them focus on learning something different. So they were out in the open and vulnerable with the issues they've had and just understanding their how they learn and being vocal about that made it easier to teach a trade.
Okay. And Keith?
Yeah, so people have had a hard time getting that first opportunity without experience to get into trades or a better career than some of the other entry-level options that they have, and people that actually offer training in-house. So we've had people come and they've tried other places and they weren't able to get the jobs to get into that spot, and then we're able to step in here and then learn through our process, our apprenticeship.
Okay, awesome. And then for Alex, question, I caught a little bit of this in yours, but Alex, are the policymakers missing what's going on the ground? And if so, how can policy support businesses like Keith and Paul?
Okay, can you please repeat the question? Because Murphy's Law being what it is, there's someone with a leaf blower or like a trimmer of some sort right outside my window. So I missed what you said.
One more time, are the policymakers dropping the ball on what's going on the ground? With companies like Paul's and Keith, is there something more that they can be doing to support that workforce development program? And thank you, City of Oakland, for driving this conversation.
No, I don't think. I think to say that policymakers are dropping the ball is a little bit too harsh. I think policymakers have obviously a lot of competing priorities. Number one, and one of the things that policymakers have to do is balance the pressures of the status quo with the needs for transformation. And that's not an easy thing. So I'm not just gonna sort of just kind of throw them under the bus in that way. But what policymakers can do is keep certain things in mind and make sure that they keep their eyes on, you got to make sure the main thing is to keep the main thing, as they say. And part of what policymakers really need to be focused on is really having a just sort of a coherent, organizing view of how to get this stuff done. So that means you have to center workers. It means you have to maintain you have to understand that this stuff happens because of a pipeline. Paul will be the first person to tell you that if all of his future work stopped, all this great stuff that he's doing right now, he wouldn't be able to keep it up. So it's like we have to keep the wheel turning as far as that goes. And the fact is, there's plenty of work out there right now that we could do. But local government has a lot of both direct and indirect ways to promote and advance this stuff, whether it's something like local hire ordinances, whether it's something like a project labor or community workforce agreements for their own public works. It's making sure it's tying public funds not just to prevailing wages, which is state law, but really enhancing that, ensuring that there's apprenticeship, that there's training, all these things. So I'm not going to throw Shana and the rest of the public policy world here under the bus, but there's always more that can be done.
Yeah, and I think the question was what's going on the ground versus dropping the ball. So with that. With that, I hate to end this discussion, but we do have Jennifer and Greg who are really going to share more boots on the ground, the NECA. So Jen and Greg, take it away.
Thank you very much for having us and for the introduction. So we represent the Northern California chapter of the National Electrical Contractors Association, NECA, and are honored to have the opportunity to participate in today's conversation of workforce development as we recognize there is a shortage. Our chapter represents over 200 union electrical contractors who employ at any given time over 6,000 electrical workers. NECA contractors are the technical professionals responsible for the most innovative and safest electrical construction. Our chapter and the diverse group of contractors we represent have been and continue to be involved, integrated, and engaged in energy efficient markets, electrification, and decarbonization. I want to provide you with just a couple examples because I have very limited time of our involvement in Alameda County's electrical construction industry decarbonization efforts. So back in 2013, NECA and the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, along with other partners, designed and constructed an innovative new electrical training facility called the Zero Net Energy Center in San Leandro, California. Some of you may be familiar with the facility. This was the first retrofit of an existing commercial building that met the U.S. Department of Energy standards for zero net energy and exceeded the state's 2030 energy efficiency zero net goal by 17 years. So for those of you who like numbers, the center achieves a 75% reduction in energy use when compared to similar existing commercial buildings, lowering the center's carbon footprint by 175 tons of CO2 per year, which equals the carbon emitted by 30 passenger vehicles annually and savings of 500 barrels of oil each year. Our contractors sent apprentices and journey level workers to this facility, this electrical facility, to study sustainable energy systems, battery storage, and other energy saving applications. Continuing to partner with communities around Alameda County, we are currently working with the City of Berkeley on its decarbonization goals, high road job policies, job impacts of electrification, and contractor engagement. We are at the beginning stages of this process, but our ultimate goal is to put local community members to work and provide them with great career pathways. As you can see, our contractors, partners, and chapters efforts are ongoing. And as the City of Oakland embarks on this transition and explores supporting the more equitable and diverse workforce, we want everyone to remember that we, NorCal NECA, the chapter, and our partners are here as a resource and are here to help navigate this transition. And we look forward to continuing or having the opportunity to continue this conversation as our experienced, diverse, and high road contractors are bidding these community projects. So I would at this point like to turn it over to our local union partner, Jason Gumatau, to introduce himself and also to provide the group with some insight on the partnerships, pathways, and community involvement utilized for workforce development.
Good morning, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Nick, for allowing us to speak today. I wanted to talk a little bit, I guess, about what I do with our local, and then I'll get into some of the things that Jennifer touched on. So I am a state certified journey level electrician. I am an apprenticeship graduate. I live in Oakland. I also sit on the Oakland Workforce Development Board, which took a little bit today. I'm also on the Energy Efficiency Procurement Review Group for the state of California. And I'm also the chair with the Measure M Commission in Unified. So speaking about pathways, the Oakland Unified adopted, or actually the City of Oakland adopted Measure M, which provides funding for our high school network. What it does is it provides opportunities around college and career pathway studies to be built into the curriculum. The idea being, not everybody graduates and goes to college. So how do we introduce careers that don't require a a college degree to our students so they can be successful when they leave high school? And so when we talk about the trades and how you don't need a college degree to get in and to be successful, that's sort of one of the connections. And then the other side of that are, projects that are used to build a person's career along the way. So when we think about, Brooklyn Basin, or when we think about the Oakland Army Base redevelopment, right, those projects will provide jobs for apprentices coming through that are leaving perhaps Fremont High School's Architecture Academy and getting into an apprenticeship, and then having steady employment to develop as an electrician. And so one of the biggest challenges that we see are, there's not enough of covered projects like that to provide opportunities for, youth in Oakland. And, if you want to learn more about the skills that are trained at our training center, I'd be happy to meet with you offline, or our chapter director, Greg Armstrong, would be happy to explain more about our apprenticeship and the great things that are being done. Talking about opportunities and diversity, just a little snapshot of the numbers. Currently, we're around 25% are Oakland residents our Oakland residents in our apprenticeship. Roughly a third are from disadvantaged zip codes from throughout Alameda County. And I'm proud to say that 10% of our apprenticeship are women in the trade. Although the number may have dropped a little bit because we recently had a class graduate back in May. So we might be a little under 10%. And so hopefully there's an opportunity to address some of those questions, and hopefully I help provide a little bit of insight from the IBW perspective. Thanks.
Okay.
Back to you, Jennifer. From me.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jason. Okay. So we're going to wrap this up. Keith, Paul, thank you for what you do for the community and putting people to work. And Alex, thank you for your advocacy and connecting the dots. City of Oakland, Common Sparks, thank you. And with that, I'll throw it back to Michelle.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful panel discussion. Thank you all for sharing your insights and perspectives. The Slido is filled with both comments and questions, people really thinking deeply about the information presented, and especially a warm welcome to our local and regional union and training folks. It's really wonderful to have you represented here. Clearly, you're a central and core part of this conversation and the work coming ahead. Before we go on stretch break, I want to invite all of our panelists to drop their contact information into the chat if you welcome and are okay with any comments or questions coming your way. And we'll also share them into the Slido so folks can see them there. But just a round of applause. I know it's going to sound silent on Zoom, but thank you all so much for this wonderful first panel. We're going to take a 3-minute stretch break. I know that that's not much, but if you want to just stand up and stretch, grab that glass of water, we are going to get started here sharply at 11:05 with our second panel, our recruiters and employers in Decarb. We have a really awesome panel coming up and are really excited for that conversation too. So we'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Welcome back to our third session. We have a part 1 and part 2 for today, and we are rounding the corner into part 2 with a panel on recruiters for Decarb. And this was specifically asked for to hear from who are some of the major employers, who is doing some of the workforce development and looking ahead and beginning to be very proactive about that workforce development and supporting economic development towards building and transportation decarbonization. Do we have Becky on the line and ready to roll?
Yep, I'm right here.
Wonderful. We are really excited for this panel today. I'm excited to introduce Becky, both a colleague from my own time in the clean energy space, but also just a really thoughtful thinker as we look at our future in Decarb. Becky is the program manager with building electrification and energy efficiency at East Bay Community Energy, the CCA in Oakland, and she develops and works on their program portfolio for decarbonizing buildings. With more than 15 years of experience working on energy and climate issues in the public sector, she is well versed in all things building decarb. And when she's not working, you might find her hanging out with her dogs and chickens. See the photo here, enjoying all of the California's outdoor delights or silently judging people's light bulb choices at restaurants and dining establishments, as do I, Becky. Welcome and thank you for your leadership in moderating today's panel.
Thank you so much. And a major thank you to the folks at the City of Oakland and the folks from Common Spark who have put together a series of really valuable panels on a super important issue. I wanted to get started with just a few slides to set some context, and then we'll be moving our way through our panelists. I'm hearing first from Stephen, moving on to Julina, and then after that, Tony. I believe that's the order that we settled on. I'll give a brief introduction of each speaker before they go, and then we'll have time at the end of all of the panel for a little discussion and a little question and answer. So hopefully we have a few context slides queued up here. And go to the next one. Looks like not. All right, that's no problem. So we're going to jump straight into Stephen's presentation. Stephen is a project manager at Association for Energy Affordability. AEA is a leader in the space of multifamily electrification, and I have actually worked with them in the past as well on workforce training issues. So I know that they're well qualified. Stephen specializes in developing and delivering electrification and decarbonization projects at affordable housing communities across the state. And he also acts as a technical lead for MCE's workforce education and training program, which is focused on building and creating connections for job seekers and contractors in the same space. So I'm very excited to hear from Stephen. So why don't we hand it over to him?
Cool. Thanks for the intro, Becky. As she said, I'm Stephen Gribble, and I'm a project manager at AEA. For those of you not familiar with AEA, AEA is a mission-driven nonprofit with a long history related to energy efficiency and decarbonization. We're dedicated to achieving energy efficiency in new and existing buildings as a means to both foster and maintain affordable and healthy housing communities with specific attention to those of low income. So we engage in a broad range of educational, technical, and construction management activities and services to support this mission and to continue to develop this industry. We've been longstanding proponents of building performance and electrification, and have co-authored standards for multifamily building efficiency and developed and implemented decarbonization programs at the state level, and also engaged in a wide variety of local, regional, and state advocacy efforts. So a big part of our business and one of my roles at AEA is around industry education and workforce training. To that end, one of our current contracts has us implementing MCE Clean Energy's workforce education and training program, which is basically what I'm here to talk about today. So again, for those that don't know, MCE is a not-for-profit electric utility provider serving 26 cities and 4 Bay Area counties. They basically empower local communities to make impactful decisions about how they generate electricity. Alameda County's own East Bay Community Energy operates in much the same way. Next. So MCE's workforce education and training program has a number of different components and can be broadly broken down into 2 parts. We have the job seeker side of the program and we have the employer side of the program. On the job seeker side of the program, we have a training component designed to enhance the understanding and interests of newcomers to the construction trades and building efficiency and electrification. The training component varies from training partner to training partner, but it's ultimately designed as an overview of building science, electrification, and renewable energy, as well as how that relates to the multitude of job opportunities in the space. As a follow-up to their training, the program also offers a paid on-the-job training opportunity with a variety of contractors and disciplines. This is in some way modeled in a scaled-down fashion after the union approach of earn as you learn. We ultimately want people to be able to both work and earn a living while learning new transferable skill sets and developing relationships with employers. On the employer side of things, there are also several components. In addition to connecting job seekers with employers through the paid on-the-job training opportunities, we also offer 2 other key components. The first of these are field meetings or ride-alongs with interested contractors. The intent here is to help educate and inform eligible contractor pool about best practices and approaches to high-performance building. To that end, we'll meet at an active job site, learn about the specific scopes of work, and discuss their approaches. This is really meant to support contractors who may be less familiar with high-performance building and help bring down contingency costs in bidding and make the industry more comfortable with these types of scopes. The next is an ongoing series of workshops led by myself focused on building electrification. These workshops are ultimately open to any member of the public, but generally have a target audience of contractors, engineers, and designers. I realize I missed an arrow in this diagram. Job seekers should also point to roundtables. In developing this program, we held a number of roundtables with stakeholders. We had a roundtable for job seekers hoping to understand their needs, one for contractors hoping to understand their needs on the other side of the equation, job training organizations, and also local governments. So to help really understand how we could be supportive rather than redundant in our efforts. Next. So the real meat of the program is supporting the industry by getting people to work. And we attempt to do that through the paid on-the-job training program. Part of the program provides 160 hours of program paid time for trainees at no cost to the contractor. So in order to participate in this program, contractors need to do a field meeting, which I mentioned, so that we can understand the type of work that the trainees would be doing. There's also some basic paperwork about insurance and licenses. And really, contractors that are ultimately a good fit for this program are those that have projects in electrification, such as heat pump water heating and solar. Trainees generally come into the program through an eligible training provider, oftentimes like a pre-apprenticeship program, but there are also pathways that don't require formal enrollment in such a program. During the traineeship, trainees have access to a high performance building module, which is again taught by myself on all things building science and energy. Ultimately, there are a few goals of the traineeships. We want people to gain useful building performance and electrification skills and techniques. We want them to develop technical skills through training and work experience. We want them to have access to resources and mentoring to increase success, in their future careers. This can be manifested as wraparound services, not just, mentoring with relation to work. And ultimately, we want people to receive an offer for full-time employment at the end of their traineeship. Next. So, traineeships can lead to a lot of different high-road, high-performance building jobs, but some potential roles that people can find themselves in are actually working with Keith at EcoHome Performance, working as an HVAC technician, a solar installer, lighting technician or designer. We have mechanical engineering contractors. There's even some roles in construction management. Really, anything that's a high-performance, high-road job is what we're targeting with the program. Next. So in order to gain more knowledge and stakeholder perspectives on barriers to electrification work, we did hold a number of roundtables. These were roundtables with contractors, job seekers, training organizations, and local government and community partners. We ultimately use these discussions to help inform our program. So some of the main things that were cited in the employer roundtable about challenges with electrification were a lack of skilled labor force, and then also consumer education around energy efficiency. However, the number one desired qualification is that trainees need to be reliable. Keith was actually at our roundtable and expressed to us that finding folks ready to show up and do the work is actually one of the more challenging aspects. To that end, one of the classroom components of the training programs we partnered with is actually how to show up on time and be ready to work. It's a skill that is learned. Then on the trainee side of things, COVID has actually been a huge hurdle in getting people to work. A number of people who had engaged in and completed training programs have actually pulled themselves from the labor pool for a variety of reasons, ranging from personal safety to childcare and everything in between. It's also really given workers an improved sense of self-worth and some additional leverage in terms of available benefits and not necessarily needing to go right back to work. I think this can most acutely be seen in food service currently, but it extends to the trades as well. People don't just want a survivable wage. They want, as one of the other panelists said, a thriving wage. Job seekers are also not always aware of the availability of these types of jobs and that they are a dramatically growing industry. So one of the ways that we've incorporated that feedback into the program is by trying to show trainees what the massive stream of funding for this type of work means to them, which is ultimately a plethora of jobs, and more importantly, long-term job security. And in the state of California, there are literally billions of dollars of funding to support this type of work over the coming years. Next. So now that we've been running the program for a while, we've actually learned a fair amount about what we can do and improve. So for starters, $18 an hour was our current on-the-job training pay rate and is generally aligned with employer offerings for starting wages. But in our experience, it's really not enough to be compelling to job seekers. I think this is ultimately something that the industry needs to reckon with. Residential construction is typically lowest cost gets the job, which doesn't really translate particularly well to high wages, but working in a challenging environment for $18 an hour is a tough sell when advertised starting wages at Panda Express down the street are $18.75 and require no experience. In my training sessions, I always survey the classroom about what job folks are hoping to obtain after completing their programs. And one of the ones that struck me was that a few people recently expressed that they were hoping to go work as pipe fitters at the Chevron refinery in Richmond. That job comes with a starting wage of something like $35 an hour and full benefits. Even though it's really not aligned at all with where we need to go as a society, objectively speaking, I was really hard pressed to tell them that that was a bad opportunity that would not provide for them and their families. And these are the kinds of things that these industries are competing against. Another big lesson that we learned is that the lack of public knowledge and awareness on the availability and importance of electrification, again, really hampers efforts. And speaking with a large number of contractors, consumer awareness really drives demand for this type of work. Using water heaters as an example, most people inherently understand how they work to the degree that igniting a flammable gas creates a heat source, which then heats a tank of water, and now my shower is hot. Those same people do not at the same time necessarily possess the level of understanding regarding the mechanics of a heat pump and how that works, which translates to less consumer interest and more of an uphill pathway for performing contractors to design and ultimately sell that scope of work. Public education will be key in driving demand for this type of work, and it's something that the Workforce Education Training Program hopes to address through regularly scheduled electrification workshops. That's what I got for right now. If there's any further questions, please feel free to email me. Oh, sorry, next. I'm always happy to talk about this in any capacity. This is what I love. This is what I do. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I know that we're going to have some questions for you, so thank you for hanging around and participating. Next up, we're going to hear from Julina Bonilla. Julina has a rich background in workforce initiatives. As a director for the Department of Labor, Job Corps, she managed recruitment strategies for young adults and low-income communities. Today, she's the Workforce Development Manager at the Port of Oakland and is responsible for the development and management of workforce initiatives and partnerships that focus on creating healthy communities. She also currently serves as a trustee for the Peralta Community Colleges. We're very excited to have her here today. Turn it over to you, Julina.
Hello, and thank you. Good morning. We're still good morning, everyone. So super happy to be here. Like I said, good morning, and thank you for having me on the panel. As you heard from Becky, my name is Julina Bonilla, and I'm the Workforce Development Manager at the Port of Oakland. So I just want to start off by quickly thanking the City of Oakland, Green Lining Institute, and Rising Sun Energy, or Rising Sun Center for Opportunity for initiating this important dialogue, which we're now 3 series into, around decarbonization and the implications for our community in terms of economic opportunity and development. If we move to the next slide. Let me just start off by talking a little bit about social responsibility division embedded in the Port of Oakland's framework. So the relationship and really the relationship of local, regional, and the port as a global community. So as you all may know, the port is a public agency in the state of California that does not receive public tax dollars, but rather it's a revenue generating enterprise comprised of a seaport. Think about all those shipping containers out there in the bay right now. Think about the airport and the Oakland Airport, which many of you are familiar with, and commercial buildings. Think about Jack London Square. This means that the port also serves as an international gateway and economic engine for the Bay Area on all those 3 different levels that I just talked to you, that I just mentioned. And what does this mean in terms of decarbonization and jobs and our community? This is where the Port of Oakland Social Responsibility Division plays a critical role in the engagement of our local community by way of ensuring that the community has a voice and is a real partner in how the port conducts economic development. And this has also resulted in the development and adoption of the Seaports Air Quality 2020 and Beyond plan, which is focused on moving the port towards a zero emissions seaport. Super important for this conversation, central. Next slide. And this means that the port works directly within a geographical area called the local impact area, which prioritizes those communities that are most impacted by the port's activity. This includes Oakland, West Oakland in particular, the city of Alameda, San Leandro, and Emeryville. This means that when the port adopts and or negotiates policies, and we heard that referenced in the earlier portion of this panel, that these policies focus on economic development and really start to think about prioritizing the impact of our area partners, making sure that they're at the table, they're providing input, feedback, and in some cases, serving on working groups that provide technical assistance. And these are active community groups and or members that you've heard about. And what's really interesting about this is that these community tables that are convened by the port really start to have an impact on what was earlier referenced. And I loved how Alex Landsberg talked about this in terms of policymaking. The balance and the pressure of the status quo and community needs. This is really important. And this is where public agencies can play a critical role in how economic development happens. And as we're talking about climate change, we're talking about the impact of climate change on community, on our local community, our global community. It becomes really important to have that voice. So when we think about jobs, you know, the port employs just at the seaport alone, a little over 13,000 workers. And those workers are either direct or indirect, indirectly serving the port. This means that issues around or that you've heard earlier, especially through NECA and the IBEW, who was talking about their training program, where jobs are being impacted around infrastructure development, right? So if you think about electrification goes hand in hand with our infrastructure towards on a pathway towards zero emission. And this, if you look at the port's 2020 and beyond infrastructure planning, is central to that development. This means that the building trades, especially those that are most involved around electrification, are going to play a critical role in the work that we're doing. Local business utilization, that's also plays a central role where we're making sure to keep our work and our contractors local. That has a direct impact on climate, has a direct impact on building out our community. And then of course, fair wages, you heard reference to that around prevailing wages and ensuring that the port is a good partner in upholding not just fair wages. I heard earlier the phrase thriving wages, super important. And all of that feeds into the port's kind of value system around workforce development and coupled with economic development. So with that, I will move to the next slide. Here are some of the equity initiatives that the port is engaged in. The public engagement plan, I think is really important. This is where the port is actively convening as a partner, ensuring that there are a community, a variety and a diverse community of folks sitting at the table and being part of those negotiations on both planning and development. This is critical. So as the seaport is engaged in its pathway towards a zero emission port, we need the community at the table. We need that input. There was reference to project labor agreements earlier in the conversation. The port has one of the longest or one of the most senior project labor agreements that's now in its 21st year. That project labor agreement has transitioned and evolved over time. And in our last iteration of that project labor agreement, there are stronger workforce goals to ensure that some of our most disadvantaged workers are prioritized, and that those prioritizations go hand in hand with some of those skills within the trades that we know are going to be thriving and increasing. And so a lot of that has to do with list trades like the IBEW, ensuring that those goals for local hire and our most disadvantaged workers have an opportunity and are prioritized for entrance into those high wage, high skilled jobs. We have other policies like the the operations policy, jobs policy. That policy also is strictly tied to warehouse development. So as we see movement of goods and we see warehousing being built in our urban centers, like next to the port or near ports, that's a new phenomenon, right? Because most of our warehousing has been in the Central Valley. Now we see an emergence of warehouse building that is near ports. And the operations job policy, again, has local hiring agreements embedded in those policies. And we are committed to ensuring that there is clear implementation and upholding of those. The First Source Fair Chance Hiring Program is just another example of how the port is adopting policy, again, with community input to balance out those pressure of status quo and needs and community needs that were mentioned earlier. The next slide. How does all of this fit in with kind of the port's vision? So if you look at the seaport's emission sources, you'll see that our shipping, container ships, our tugboats, our cargo handling equipment, and some of the other modalities are terrible emission sources that need to be mitigated. And this is where infrastructure and planning really plays a key role. I think we've heard from some of our training partners just previous to me. I think you heard from Stephen and from Jason Gumatau with IBEW about the role of electrification is going to take on a central role in how we build out our infrastructure. Next slide. So here are some of the projects that have either been completed or are underway. The shore power, that was a monumental infrastructure development to ensure that the container ships that are pulling in and docking alongside while they're being loaded or offloaded are connected to shore power, that they're turning off those big diesel engines and stop emitting that horrible diesel particulate matter into the air, which the port has been super successful in. Your RTGs, which are these large diesel engines that operate them, have been replaced with hybrid engines that are both that run on very little diesel and battery. And then we have our zero emission trucks. Those are projects. So the first two that I mentioned, shore power and RTGs, are completed projects. Where we see continued projects underway are really through charging stations to be able to support zero emission vehicles like trucks. Next slide.
And we should probably move to wrap up pretty soon, as much as I hate to cut this short.
No, most definitely. This is the very last slide. So I won't go through each of them, but you can see here, this is a nice visual representation of all of the potential zero emission pathways that the port will support as it moves to zero emission ports. And with that, should end the presentation.
Thank you so much, Julina. It's been really exciting to see all of the projects that the port has been working on and the way that you've really lived up to your values by incorporating PLAs and ensuring opportunities for the community. So we're really grateful for your leadership in this space. We'll be moving on to Tony. So hopefully while they're pulling the slides up, I'll give an intro. So Tony Shara oversees recruiting for Tesla's START programs, the manufacturer-specific advanced training programs for both service and manufacturing technician roles. He's hosted at various community college events. These are hosted at various community colleges across the country, excuse me. With 14 years in technical recruitment and the last 6 years specifically for skilled trades, he's passionate about creating impactful programs that can be executed and successful. Tony, I'm very pleased to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Becky. And again, thank you everyone for having me, and everyone on these panels. It's always good from like the private sector to hear as much as possible from our neighbors and what's going on. And we at Tesla are huge believers in being shepherds in our community, and really try and build these programs to be, as mentioned, intentful. So again, my name is Tony Shara. I sit within our workforce development and recruiting organization. I've been with Tesla on and off for almost 10 years. So have seen some things in terms of decarbonization and electrification, and just the wave and the momentum and change in those 10 plus years, 5 of which living specifically in the Bay Area. And so really want to talk about how we approach hiring specifically for a very decarbonized role like EV, electric vehicles and or manufacturing of electric vehicles. So first and foremost, our mission is our North Star. It's our guiding principle, and it's to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. That's been pretty much our guiding light for a long time. And we try and live it and practice what we preach as much as possible. We're constantly making changes to how we manufacture, how we recycle, how we, energy use, how we're doing things. Are we as, walking the walk and talking the talk, so to speak. So a big reason for that and a big portion of that is kind of like bringing things in-house and or living up to like the kind of like the 3 guiding principles of or ethos of this company. Next slide. So the big things that we're really looking for in the future that we want really is, is threefold. It's generation, storage, and transportation. What you see in that first picture is our solar glass. It's our, it's a complete roof and roof tiles with a photovoltaic cell built into it. Sexy, sleek, aesthetically pleasing, but also, from a science perspective, a ton of coverage, right? But that's never always been good enough for us. Storage is, I feel, is like actually the sexiest part of our company. I know people think it's our cars, but for me, it's our storage systems. Being able to harness, solar, wind, geothermal, whatever it is, being able to actually hold on to it, I feel it has so much value and has the ability to really make serious changes in our community and impact, some of these huge emission problems that we do see. It now then replaces a lot of, nasty reasons for using, diesel generation. So really one of those things that I love to talk about and I'm always fascinated by. But the way we got there is through our transportation, is through our cars, right? We are a technology company, just happens to make a really sexy electric vehicle. Really proud of the car. I've actually been able to say that I've seen the launch of our first car come off the line at Fremont, and I've been a part of every single launch since then. It really is a mindset shift. Like a lot of these things, kind of similar to like what Paul was talking about earlier. It's the mindset of society and our communities really needs to change. And seeing the adoption of electric vehicles over the like I remember when I first started with the company, I felt like I was getting attacked for working for a company like Tesla, and that it would never be successful. And to see where we're at today really is a testament to the type of people we hire. And so when we look at how we hire people, we've got to look at the type of people we're hiring and what we're doing for them while they're here, building programs that we really want to see successful, but also create strong trajectory. And so one of those programs that I want to really focus on is programs called the START program. So next slide. So Tesla's START program is a 12 to 16 week intensive technical training program equipping future technicians with the skills and expertise to be successful technicians and grow their careers within Tesla. Upon graduation, successful students have the opportunity to become mid-level technicians in our rapidly expanding network of Tesla service centers and factories. So it really is an advanced training where we're layering on top of folks' background and experience to get what we need specifically when it comes to electric vehicles, and then also newly our manufacturing program, what it is that we're not seeing out in the community that we need to build upon. All these things are things made specifically for Tesla, but with the new electrification of all vehicles coming on board, it's very mission critical and it steers towards that. Next slide. So we kind of looked at like our training backlogs, hiring ramps, and train pipeline. And this is the why and the who. And I know you guys can all see a little bit more on our website. I'm getting rushed up here, but really, this is what we're looking at, is like starting with the why and developing the who, and looking into our community and how do we develop those people. Next slide. So see, these are some of the numbers, and they're not pretty, but at the same time, it's like if you're not willing to kind of like open the door and show what's inside, you never know how to grow and learn. So but to date, actually, so this is just a little bit older, but we're now over 550 technicians placed across the country. We've got now we're starting our 9 and 10 programs starting in the next couple of weeks. We're at over 110 graduates placed in Tesla service centers alone in 2020. And so we've got a 92% graduation rate. Not 100% doesn't get through, and it's just because life happens. 85% of placement because we're placing them all across the country. This has become 75% of our entry-level technicians within our service org, and will be hopefully the majority or lion's share of all of our equipment maintenance technicians. We're actually piloting that out in Austin. So we have 4 dedicated recruitment specialists now, and 8 full-time instructors. We've just added 2 more. But taking a look at the numbers too, you can see, a really strong proportion of it is underrepresented communities. That women number and that veteran number are things that I really would love to raise, and we are focusing on that. We've got ancillary programs like our Pathways to Start program that focuses on females and underrepresented communities, in kind of filling that gap and putting them back in the pipeline so that there's an even playing field. We really work hard to be intentful and make sure that we have great equitable representation in our programs, because it is indicative of the company itself. Next slide. So as you can see the growth, we've continually grown. Like I said, we're up to over 550 technicians placed worldwide, and that's happening constantly. You can actually see more of that in our most recent impact report that we dropped yesterday. And that talks a lot more about not just our programs, but our electrification, our reduction in carbonization, things that we're taking, the steps we're taking towards manufacturing in a clean environment, building in a clean environment, and reducing our footprint. Really is, it's a beast of an impact report. Please, take a look at it. You can probably find it on our web. You definitely can find it on our website. I think Zach, we drop it in. He's going to drop it in the chat as well. And I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. But really, and you can see our footprint right now in North America. We're getting ready to add Austin Community College for our manufacturing program, and then another program in Texas. And we will build programs as we find our demands and needs. Big fan in not building programs just to build programs. I want to make sure that when we build something, there's jobs waiting for these people. There is no hope, there really is. It's continuous. And when we take this approach, again, we're being strategic, we're being intentful, we're taking a look at the community itself and who can we pull from that community. Love working with community colleges. Big fan of that. As you can see, all our programs are hosted at community colleges across the country. And how do we benefit them, and how do we benefit their pull? Working with administration, working with local education organizations and consortiums to really make sure that, hey, the folks that are coming into their schools are getting the fundamental trainings, because it really does come down to the fundamentals. This isn't rocket science. It really is, giving people access to fundamental training that it works across all infrastructure. And like I said, I'm a big fan of storage. It also means I'm a big fan of infrastructure. And so that's it. thanks for my for my abbreviated presentation, and thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you so very much. I really like that we heard from a large employer at the port who's leveraging PLAs to bring in new workforce entrants and local hire ordinances. Tony with Tesla, which had a really different approach, sort of bringing the training in-house and running it internally instead of relying solely on external programs. And then what MCE is doing for job matching. I have one question as moderator, and then we'll turn to Slido. I, as with many folks, experienced the ARA workforce efforts of the 2008-2009 timeframe, where we trained hundreds of folks specifically in energy auditing across the state, and then found that there weren't that many jobs in that specific field. As we plan for a just transition and decarbonization, how are folks, what recommendations do you have for making sure we avoid that challenge and that we actually are able to design training programs that are relevant and provide opportunities for the trainees? Happy for any and all of you to address this.
I'll take this one, actually. So I myself am actually a product of those early ARA years, and I got a grant from the federal government to do some training for just what you talked about, Becky. And a number of other folks did the same thing for a supposed avalanche of work that never really materialized. One of the key differences, I think, from that experience to now, and something that we can do differently, is that the support for that type of work is fundamentally different. Those early building performance days were primarily supported by financial incentives like the Energy Upgrade California program, which actually still exists in a few different manifestations. But today, this work is, and it's still driven to some degree by the availability of incentives, but it's also driven to a large degree now by building codes and policies. So like, for example, Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, they have enacted gas bans on new gas infrastructure and new construction. That's like a thing that has to happen. It's not like an opt-in for a building owner. If you are a developer and you're building a new building, that's like what you have to do as the de facto minimum standard, right? So that policy and code work really drives this type of work. Another example is San Jose has reach codes. I mean, lots of places have reach codes, but San Jose, one of them is that they require new developments to be electric vehicle ready. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to put chargers in your parking lots, but it does mean that you have to run conduit and provide stub outs and access for that stuff, so that when you decide in 10 years you do want EV chargers in your apartment, you don't have to dig up the parking lot to do it. At the state level, Title 24 and the current code cycle now requires mandatory solar readiness. It's like a de facto minimum. It's not an opt-in. These are things that we have to do. The point here is that policy and codes really drive this type of work. Financial incentives are important, but from a city perspective, from a regional perspective, from a state perspective, codes and policies drive the demand for this type of work. And we've seen that a lot over the last few years. So that's kind of the answer to that.
That's great. That makes sense. Do any of the other panelists want to talk, please?
Yeah. I think I really do think for me, it's something I like to challenge other employers. I feel the private sector does need to put a little more skin in the game. Like, you can't go expecting people to come in trained if you're not telling organizations or schools or consortiums or agencies how or what you need, right? Further, it's not their fault that they can't keep up, because again, that back and forth is not always easy. But further, it really is. I do big believer, like I said, being a shepherd in our community also means putting some skin in the game, and it means going out and helping build these programs with these organizations. We've seen such huge success as a result, and I feel like the schools that we work with benefit significantly from that, because it just it's like, if you want to solve a problem, we're big fans of doing it ourselves, and hey, let's help these organizations do that themselves.
So really opening communication lines between industry and workforce trainers to communicate which skills are needed in the growth you're seeing in the industry.
And I think it's also being very honest about it too.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that with the work that like we're training for, and a lot of the other people that were on the call were training for, was actually boots on the ground, getting things done, skilled trade jobs, which require lots of technical skill. And you learn all those things through doing all that work, and with hopefully some in-house training, as compared to your comparison of like 2008 being energy auditors. Like, those people were trained to do energy audits and things, but they weren't actually fixing any houses. And what we're doing, and what the other people, they're the building infrastructure for electric cars, or building electric cars, or fixing houses, doing advanced HVAC systems. Like those, there's going to be movement within all the trades for any of those career choices they make, whether it's even within those specific things, or they'll be able to move into other things. Once you master a trade or any of those skills, like, you become very valuable. And in any society, we're going to be building and doing things. It may have some ebbs and flows, but the real good people with the great skills don't usually lose those jobs, even during those recessions. In my experience, I started our business in 2008.
Yeah, definitely. I hear that that's echoed in the High Road Training Partnership Report, the need for programs that don't just train to niche, but have a broader set of more transferable skills in the construction trades in particular. So I really appreciate that. I wanted to turn to at least one question that's coming in from Slido. And I would encourage all the panelists to see if they can jump into Slido and see the questions. I think many of these could be responded to in chat. But let's go to one question quickly for Tesla. What's the average starting wage and benefits package after completing the START program? And how long do graduates typically stay in the industry after completing it?
It's a great question. So I'll use Bay Area specifically. So for our service technicians, so our service program, while they're in program, they actually make $19 an hour and have full benefits. The only thing they don't have is equity. So while training as an intern in our program, they have benefits and equity, they have benefits and a pretty strong wage from day one. From there, their wage is determined based on the level that they come out. So this is an opportunity within the 12 to 16 weeks for them to actually determine how much they make. So how well they do in the program determines the level that they come out of. And it can range from anywhere from minimum, I think it's like $24 to $25 an hour, upwards to 29 to 20, coming out of the program itself. That includes the benefits that they've already received, as well as at that moment, they do get equity in the company. Everyone at Tesla gets equity in the company.
Wonderful. I think we're probably out of time, but it looks like maybe we have time for one last question, and we'd love for this to be a really quick answer. For Stephen, does MCE also support the development of women and minority-owned enterprises for your more entrepreneurial-minded participants?
We do. I'm remiss in saying that none of the contractors that we have as part of our participating group really hit that note. That's something that we would really like to improve on. It's something that we've talked about with regards to how do you really bring these people into the fold and support their endeavors. It's not a nut that we've cracked necessarily. Some of MCE's programs do have requirements for working in or operating in disadvantaged communities. That's actually a key piece of a lot of the programs that we at AEA run. So that's really more about supporting specific communities rather than supporting specific entrepreneurial endeavors. But it's certainly something that we would like to look at and improve on. And I think that there's a lot of room to do so.
Thanks for the honest answer. All right, we're going to squeeze in one last question, and I'd like, again, for it to be as quick of an answer as we can manage for time. This is for Julina. What % of Port of Oakland employees are union represented, and what % are contingent or temporary workers, if you have that information?
That's a great question. And I think a little bit of clarity also. So when I mentioned the over 13,000 employees that work either at the port or port related, you have to remember that the port is a public agency and has a little over 400 employees who are direct port employees who are all represented by collective bargaining agreements. So that's very port specific. And then you have port related. So you've got ILWU, you've got trade folks, becomes a little bit more complex when it comes to those who are contracting with the port, who are also port related employees. So hopefully that clears up and answers the question.
That does. And I think that concludes our time on this panel. I want to really thank all three of our speakers for bringing their time and expertise today. There were a few documents that were dropped in the chat related to Tesla. So if you're curious about those, go take a look. I would love if panelists could drop their contact information in the chat as well. And as I mentioned, if you do get a chance, our panelists, to see Slido, there were some great questions we didn't have time to get to today that perhaps could be followed up offline. And I'll turn it back over to Common Spark.
Thanks so much, Becky. And thank you to all of our panelists, both in our recruiters panel, but also in the first panel that we had today. I'm not going to spend time on this slide because I want to get to what folks can expect next coming out of the really rich conversation and insights and perspectives that we heard today. So I'm going to pass it to Shayna from Oakland and also Marissa from Economic Development to just cover what folks can expect to see coming out of this process next.
Thanks, Michelle. There are 3 different key documents listed in front of you in bold on the screen. These are the biggest next steps that are going to be coming out of this, directly informed by what's happened in this session. I really want to focus on the economic development strategy piece of that, though, so I'll turn it over to Marissa to talk about that. And Marissa, I think you're muted.
I got it. Thank you. I've been listening so hard for 2 hours. Thank you, Shayna, and thanks so much to all the panelists. I learned a lot this session and gave me a lot of great ideas. I'm Marissa Raya with the city's Economic and Workforce Development Department. One of the things I do at the city is help manage a document that kind of guides, sets what our goals are for economic development in Oakland, establishes performance measures, and engages community and industry groups on how we can better deliver the services that we have in economic development to achieve those goals. That's called our economic development strategy. We had one covering the years 2018, 2020, and now we are updating for a new one in 2022. This is a very special year, so we have a recovery plan kind of transitioning us between our 2 strategies. But overall, the goals that I want to lead with for economic development in Oakland include reducing racial wealth disparities between Black, Latino, Native, Asian, and white Oakland households, and increasing overall household security, the amount of savings and cushion that families have to survive in Oakland, in an increasingly expensive Oakland, I might add. And in the Oakland Equity and Climate Action Plan, there's some pretty clear direction for my department, which is Economic and Workforce Development. And that includes equitable job creation, which we've heard a lot about today, investment in frontline communities. So infrastructure dollars should be prioritized in frontline communities. And also we were asked, and this has been really fun for me, to evaluate the potential for a sequestration incubator in Oakland. And if any of you want to talk about that, I'm all ears. On the equitable job creation side, one of the things that I've experienced working in Oakland for the last 7 years is that when we have an emerging sector, we have more opportunity to drive equity into the overall market related to that sector when it comes to both business ownership and job development. And just 2 quick examples, when we started legalizing cannabis in Oakland, this is the public side example. The city was able to pass a regulation that just said a certain number of business licenses for cannabis in Oakland are going to be reserved for equity applicants. And there is going to be support programs that come along with that. On the private sector side, when tech started to grow in Oakland earlier in the last decade, we didn't have as much authority as a city to kind of control how who businesses hired, but the pressure and the advocacy around closing racial disparities in tech hiring and in the tech business world really led to a lot of investment in training organizations and nonprofits and boot camps in Oakland, as well as in computer science education in Oakland. And the city's role was more kind of pushing for that and setting that expectation that if you were, as a company coming to Oakland, we expected you to participate in our tech hire community. The other thing that I've been listening for in these 3 sessions has been opportunities for business development and decarbonization for both new firms and current Oakland firms that might adapt or change their operations. One thing that's going to be really big for City of Oakland over the next couple of years is increasing the equity in in the demographics of the business owners that receive public contracts. So that's something we're paying very close attention to, and we'll have some and are developing some programs around, especially in construction. And finally, I'm listening for when the money talks. Part of our job in economic development, it's less that we get to give out money usually, it's more that we are looking for partners that we can collaborate with to go after state and federal incentives for both electrification and sequestration. And these sessions have just given me so many ideas. And I'll put my email in the chat. It's also on this slide if you would like to follow up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Really, really excited about seeing the new economic development strategy and working with you to make sure that our plans for decarbonizing Oakland, buildings in Oakland, transportation in Oakland really do dovetail with that economic development work. So moving forward, we will be sending out notes from the session. I'm hoping we will be able to send out a link to the recording as well. And if the presenters are able to, respond to remaining questions that were in the Slido, we will include those with the notes. And in terms of a next session, we are looking at having some kind of final 4th session that will probably be structured around sharing out the documents, the informational reports, and others that are being generated as a result of these sessions. So stay tuned for what that's going to look like. We're still forming that idea, but that is what we're hoping to do sometime in the fall. So again, thank you so much for attending and participating. This is the first time I've used Slido, and I thought it was a wonderful tool. It seemed like that encouraged a lot of participation. If there's anything else that I'm forgetting, Michelle, please jump in.
Thank you to the City of Oakland for your leadership in this topic. Thank you for all the panelists for your prep. Thank you to our excellent moderators, and thank you to everyone who was here and engaged with us today.
And if we don't have your contact info to send out the notes, please email one of us. There are a lot of emails in the chat. Mine is up at the top towards there, so feel free to reach out.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Want to close it out, Sahela?